Hello, friends. I'm Dr. David Litwa, and part of my book, Understanding Gnosis, includes 14 principles of Gnostic spirituality. And I want to share those with you here. My sources are ancient from the Nag Hammadi and related literature, but I focus on those principles which I find most applicable today. I hope that all of you will go grab the book and meet me over at the Gnostic Archive, which is a database that I'm running to keep you up to date on Gnostic and Nag Hammadi literature. Some of you may never have read a scholarly work on Gnosis, and so I'm providing summaries so that you can get up to speed on the latest developments. Many of those summaries are free, and I encourage everyone to sign up and subscribe to get notified. The first principle is that Gnosis is a higher mode of knowing. A Gnostic is technically anyone who claims to have Gnosis. But by Gnosis, we mean a specific thing, not just a particular belief or set of beliefs or attitudes, but a special kind of knowledge or insight that brings salvation. But Gnosis is more than just a kind of knowledge, it's also a mode of knowing, a different form of consciousness. This form of consciousness is supra-rational, above reason and normal means of cognition. It's also supra-empirical, beyond the ordinary five senses. Gnosis grants access to a supreme or spiritual level of reality. Without this experience of the transcendent, at least on some level, there is no Gnosis. Gnosis thus assumes that humans have the ability to experience reality on a deeper level. Gnosis is typically a knowledge or mode of knowing rejected by the broader society. Indeed, Gnosis can be unauthorized, transgressive, heretical, sometimes even dangerous. Gnosis is all these things, not because it's inherently bad or criminal, but because it's higher than any form of human cognition. This is why Gnosis is sometimes perceived as a threat to reason and to science, not because it's anti-rational or anti-scientific, but because it represents a higher form of knowing. This form of knowing only usually occurs in peak experiences, which tend to happen by serendipity or surprise. Some Gnosis is so different from ordinary knowledge that it seems like ignorance or madness. Our second principle is that the true God is above every concept of God. The human mind is a beautiful thing, but it's also a factory for idols. Every God it conceives is necessarily an idol because the true God cannot be contained by any human creed or concept. To be sure, a concept of God is not yet an idol, but it becomes an idol when there is an identification of God's reality with the concept. Concepts of God can be good or bad, healthy or destructive. God has been called a loving father, but also a man of war. In both cases, the reality of God always and by necessity stands above the concept. So who or what is God? We cannot say. To be honest, we cannot even say that God is God. That is but a common name for the supreme something, of whom we in fact know nothing. Everything known of God can be negated, and what is negated can be negated again. God can be called the good. In fact, however, God is beyond the good and beyond any predicate. To claim that God is good is an act of faith. This faith is not an assumption, but a kind of intuition based on experience and insight. This is Gnostic faith, not a complete leap into the void, but a faith born of experience. Does the Gnostic love God? If so, how can one love what is unknown? It is sufficient for the Gnostic to be loved by God, and so truly to discover what love is. God and the world are not opposites. Despite being unknown and different from matter, God is not alien or distant from this world. but somehow interpenetrates it. God's primal thought declares, I am in all sovereignties and powers, and in angels, and every movement in all matter. I am the light illumining all. So God is not alien. Rather, the world has made itself alien to God by departing so dramatically from divine reality. But divine reality can still inhabit our world by means of an energy or light or spirit. Gnosticism is not necessarily dualism, and temporary dualisms needed to live human life, such as the distinction between matter and energy, can be overcome. Some Gnostics did say or imply that matter is evil, and arguably so did Plotinus. At the same time, other Gnostics accepted that matter is alive and intelligent or interpenetrated by God and beautiful due to its imitation of God. All material beauty is on some level a manifestation of God. And despite the polemical attempt to make Gnostics into the biggest cosmic complainers, their texts show an appreciation of beauty. Gnostics can hate the archons, but they don't typically hate the world. Gnostic acosmism or anti-cosmism has been greatly overplayed. Gnosis is the true humanism, for God is human. The human face of God is not just a metaphor. For Gnostics, God was human long before the incarnation of God in Jesus. God, or to be more precise, the second tier deity, was the model for humanity at its first creation. This means that humanity, as it ought to be, is deathless. It has nothing to do with flesh, but everything to do with God's divine consciousness, his primal thought, his first attempt at self-representation. The human as divine thought, God's first thought, is the true human. The natural goal of salvation is for humans to assimilate to the first and primal human. This assimilation is also a form of deification, for the human is God, a deathless and beautiful reflection of God. Accordingly, people don't lose their humanity by becoming more like God. Instead, they become truly human, which is nothing less than becoming God. But the God here is typically the second God figure, often called Logos, sometimes Barbello, God's primal thought. By exercising our higher consciousness, higher than reason, Gnostics try to return to recapitulate God's first thought. All animals have a mode of locomotion and some have speech, but God and humanity alone have a higher mode of knowing. Each human has a divine spark. Gnostics don't recognize themselves as creations of God, at least not entirely. A creation is something made, like a tool. The tool maker makes a hammer, and the hammer, though useful, and perhaps even beautiful, is wholly outside the maker. Humans are not made this way. Gnostics see themselves as the sons and daughters of God. God's seed abides within. Something of the one is identical with our true self. We humans have no right to it. The divine spark is a gift received, but it is internalized and made a part of ourselves. Whatever the nature of the spark or seed or spirit within, it is part of the divine self. And without this element, humans would not even have the desire to search for God, let alone to discover God. The internalized spark is what makes Gnosis possible in the first place. It explains why knowing the self can lead to knowledge of God. The internalized spark is not an excuse for pride, but a cause for humility. History is not about us. It's about God knowing God, the spark returning to the greater fire. Gnostics mix things, but they don't mix things up. A strict Jew or Muslim might say that the idea of God incarnating in a human being is the ultimate heresy, a piece of paganism pulsating at the heart of Christianity. But the world can never be easily divided into pagan and pious ideas. Ideas mix and combine, and they can be called ours or theirs by different people in different times. Identifying an idea as pagan is basically saying that it's foreign to one's religious sensibilities. But religious communities change and develop, and they can adapt pagan ideas to make them pious at different times and by different people. Even strictly monotheistic faiths have incarnational elements. such that objects or places, for instance, Torah scrolls or the Kaaba, are bathed in sacrality and the divine presence. If God was really wholly other, full stop, there would be no religions, because there would be no perception or contact with true power. Gnostics know that like is known by like. Humans can only perceive God because there's something of God in humanity. So Gnostics go out and look for God, happy to learn whatever cognitive frames and languages are necessary for escaping one's cultural assumptions. Gnostics seem like magpies, eclectic pickers of esoteric lore, but they know what they're looking for, or at least they know it when they see it. Their wandering is purposeful, even if they don't know it yet. The Gnostic has a kind of knowledge which leads them to pick the right sort of book in the library, even if they must levitate to reach it. Gnostics are not always conscious of their knowledge. For the Gnostic, the truth is already inside them, so they have the key to finding it outside of them. It's a matter of finding correspondences and links. These links might seem coincidental, but the Gnostic knows that they are something more. Insofar as they know the truth in themselves, they know or have intimation of what it looks like. Like is known by like. Thus, even in things perceived as alien by others, Gnostics see a bit of themselves, or rather, the greater self. The lower rulers can be evil or cruel. This point shouldn't surprise anyone. Christians of all stripes believe that the world is controlled or at least influenced by evil angels called demons. The whole world lies under the sway of the evil one, according to 1 John 5:19. Does it make much of a practical difference whether ancient Christians called this being Satan or Yaldabaoth? Paul wrote that Satan transforms himself into an angel of light. According to Gnostics, so does the Creator. He wants to appear as good, loving, and generous, but his true character shines through the scripturalized stories about him. He murders young boys by bears. He punishes those who obtain knowledge. He floods the earth with no respect for the sacredness of life. He pretends that he's the only God and has convinced millions, or rather, narratives about him have convinced millions, and those narratives are inspired by archons. Does this view of reality necessarily lead to a conspiratorial mindset? Isn't gnosis then just a condemnation to self-doubt in which people constantly worry that nothing they've ever believed is true, that they are just in the matrix, and that even the redeemers and heroes in the story are just devils with more sophisticated masks? Isn't all of reality just a ploy of the military-industrial complex, the deep state, which is in fact deeper than any state or human reality? Gnostics seek because they've found. To be sure, Gnostics nurture a natural skepticism and caution about the claims of all lower rulers, including the human ones, but they are also amazingly confident that they have experienced the first fruits of redemption. Gnostics are seekers, but not because they are totally lost. They seek because on some level they know what they're looking for. They know where they came from and where they hasten. They know their birth and their rebirth. Gnostics come from the light and are its children. Accordingly, they are not anxious, and their seeking is not aimless, frivolous, or relativistic. It's not because every religion or philosophy is true. There are genuine lies out there, genuine mind traps. Gnostics won't be fully comfortable identifying with any particular religion or philosophy. They know that God is always more. A Gnostic humanity is one that does not seek its own ultimacy and survival, but one that recognizes the more and points people to it. A Gnostic seeks because they've seen. They don't seek to find. They seek because they've found, at least on some level. They have tasted truth. They remember the vision of beauty. This is because the world is not just a dark dungeon, but full of reminders and symbols, reminding Gnostics who they are. The experience of erotic love, for instance, can be a reminder of higher divine love, and there are many other examples. Higher providence prevails. The world does contain structural evils like disease and death. Children do die of cancer. Death is universal for all animals. Gnosis does not give the flesh immortality. It rather helps the recipient realize that the true self is deathless. The cosmos can turn into a nightmare, but gnosis awakens the self such that even in the dream one walks around with eyes wide open. The world might have come into being by a mistake, but it is not itself a mistake, and neither is mortal life. It's a phase in God's evolution, and a necessary one. God had to become an object of God's self knowing. For that to happen, there had to be a distinction in the Godhead. Mortal humanity is that aspect of God furthest distant from God, God's self. But humanity is also the pivot point, the point of retraction. Humanity represents God's clearest moment of self recognition, allowing a return of God to God in a perfect reunion. Every fall, every disaster in this time of separation might seem to make the world a foul domain, but the process as a whole, the plan of providence, which includes the material world, is always good, without question. Accordingly, to believe that Gnostics must be pessimists misses the point of Gnostic spirituality. Gnostics seek to transcend the wet platform. A Gnostic can certainly believe that this cosmos and our flesh suit are prisons, that politicians are archons, and that biology is something that we must finally overcome. At the same time, a Gnostic can love the world and the body and sensation because these activities are willed by providence. The lie is that we are this dying flesh, that these sensed pleasures we experience define our purpose in life, that all there is, in the end, is dead matter. As long as these dogmas are rejected, the Gnostic can enjoy natural and bodily beauty, children, sex and sexuality, and simple things like ice cream at sunset on a hot day. The fact that you have fingers, toes, ears, eyes, a mouth, and nose is not what makes you human. These fleshly organs and senses you share with other animals, who also have nerves, bones, muscles, organs, and blood. Hands and feet can be lost in war. You can lose your appendix, your kidney, and your teeth, even your eyes, all the while remaining you. You are not your flesh, at least not entirely. Gnostics don't hate the flesh by any means, but they don't idealize it either, and they don't identify it with the self. Youthful beauty is celebrated in countless advertisements, but warts and wrinkles are themselves symbols, simple and powerful reminders that we are not our flesh suits. The flesh is our current platform. It isn't our hardware, it's the software of our actual hardware. The Gnostic Paul said that flesh and blood shall not inherit the kingdom of God. According to the secret book of James, none of those who have worn the flesh will be saved. The flesh is weak, and it will get what is ordained for it. The sentences of Sextus advise us, don't seek goodness in flesh. These might seem harsh, but compared with what Philo and the Hermetica said about flesh, such remarks are actually fairly tame. Gnostics didn't hate the flesh, but they did look forward to an upgrade, a higher body, whether it be made of fire or light, or of a substance which is not made of normal matter at all. Brains die, but the higher consciousness lasts forever. Thoughts related to food, drink, and the maintenance of our bodies come and go. Divine consciousness is eternal and corresponds to reality. Living the life of divine consciousness requires a fitting platform. Gnostics are not suicidal. They recognize that they have been put in this flesh for a reason, but they maintain a Johannine attitude, quote, the flesh profits nothing. The Gospel of Philip, I think, well captures the sense of indifference or neutrality experienced toward flesh. Quote, do not fear the flesh and do not love it. If you fear the flesh, it will dominate you. If you love it, it will swallow you up and strangle you. Gnostics resist false authority, but they submit to true divinity. Here below, the exercise of power is never without passion, and one of the chief passions is itself the lust to rule. Unconditional support of any human government does not make much sense to a Gnostic. All archontic authority is suspect, and all human authority is also archontic. Human rulers are subject to the same passions as everyone else, and in positions of power, passions thrive. And this is why those with power are more open to corruption. Gnostics certainly resist lower rulers. Ancient Gnostics quoted Ephesians 6:12, "Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the world rulers of this darkness, but toward the soul and true God." We could even speak of Gnostic submission or obedience. Gnosis is the rejection of the lower order, not of order itself. Like other Christians, Gnostics look forward to a regime change. They were not critical theorists, however, who critiqued the very idea of autocratic regime. They were not cosmic anarchists. They disrupted strict boundaries between genders, but they never rejected the idea of gender as such. In fact, they ultimized it. Gnostics defeated human hierarchies to attain divine ones. They formed and led groups, communities of character, in some cases for centuries. They had offices, hymns, and rituals, which required organizational abilities. Some Gnostic groups tried to be Catholic in the sense of universal, which is to say that they tried to communicate across vast distances and to strengthen their networks. They strove to be ambassadors of peace in their societies. All this is political activity. Gnosis is mother of the virtues. There is a true gnosis and a false one. False gnosis does lead to immorality, the following of fleshly impulses, whatever the consequences. True gnosis leads to ethical behavior, or rather supererogatory behavior, behavior that goes above common moral standards. Ethical behavior does not require laws which are designed to control lawless people. There is a higher unwritten law which the Gnostic follows. There are occasions when Gnostics discount and even break human laws to follow a higher law written in the heart. Gnostic transgressiveness is real, but it's also relative and temporary. A central Gnostic myth tells how wisdom overcame her own transgressive attempt to know the Father. The realization that the Father cannot be known is the first step in Gnostic humility, and it leads to true gnosis, which is also an unknowing. True gnosis shows how much humans don't know. True gnosis identifies the knower and the known. It unites people with God. Accordingly, a prideful Gnostic is likely not a Gnostic at all. Pride makes a claim on gnosis. It tries to make gnosis into a status or possession, but gnosis possessed isn't gnosis. It's just information, however arcane or mysterious. The world isn't split between knowers and non-knowers, but between people who think they know and those who know that they don't know, or know as they should. The latter are the true Gnostics. Gnostics are at home in foreign lands. The gods are not aliens. The Gnostics are. They never quite fit into the structures and systems of this planet. Of course, they come from families, but their families may be nothing like them. Gnostics are the black sheep of the cosmos. They inhabit the margins, but mostly because they've been put there. Marginalized or not, Gnostics build houses, churches, and institutions, not to mention identities. They perceive themselves as strangers and aliens, but they can be at home anywhere. They find their place on earth when they realize earth can never be their home. Their citizenship is in heaven, but heaven isn't up, but ever present, and one must only realize it. The Gnostic home is nowhere, because it can be anywhere. Gnostics are at home when they are together. Indeed, going back to God or the source is simply about being together in a more profound way. Christ, the Revealer, says in the second discourse of Great Seth, quote, "I am in the spirit and truth of motherhood, where unity is, and I am with those who are always friends to each other. They are united by my knowledge and word in peace, which dwells completely with everyone and in everyone." In my view, Gnostic togetherness does ultimately lead to the loss of one's ego identity. Jesus says to James in the first revelation of James, quote, "You will attain to the one who is, and then you will no longer be James, but you are the one who is." What can one give in exchange for one's soul? The Gnostics had an answer. The all-soul or oversoul, one's real self. The real self is this communal self, all the selves at one with God. If this world is a kenoma, a void, then the pleroma surrounds and pervades this void, such that, in reality, there is no void. Gnostics are never outside the fullness. The world of matter is part of it. There is an undescended self we all share. In a real sense, then, Gnostics have never stopped being together, and they've never stopped being God, even as they continually try on temporary and individual identities in flesh. Everything divine returns to its source. No matter how far away Gnostics are from God, they feel that they are destined to return to their source. Our universe is the final step in the process of the source knowing itself. We are the key, the pivot point of divine reflexivity. We are the one knowing itself most consciously and profoundly. The more gnosis we obtain, the faster the one returns to itself. And this is why the realization of gnosis changes reality in human history. In an age when information and ignorance seem to grow at the same exponential rate, it's hard to see how the one is making any progress. But away from the noise of civilization, the cacophony of YouTube, the fleeting faces of Meta, in quiet places all around this world, people are coming to realize themselves in the one. Truth is triumphing in human experience. There are breakthroughs happening every moment, returns to infinity, slow but confident realizations that our individual biographies, which seem to start and stop at random, aren't the full stories of ourselves. This entity we call me is a million miles deeper than the neurons firing in our brains. In the end, we must become one because we're rushing back to the one. So all the hatred and conflict caused by difference must one day resolve into the fullness, the well of plurality, so concentrated and close packed, it is one. Obviously, this description of the Gnostic life and mode of knowing is selective and based on what I think we can retrieve from ancient Gnostic movements and thinkers. Whether you are Gnostic or not, I offer you this closing exhortation. Seek the truth you already have. Don't wait for a revelation or mystical experience. Don't pine for it if you lack it. Falling into the well of a deep sleep or experiencing a dream as reality, these are enough to remind you that consciousness is something deeper, something more than your ego self. If you've had a peak experience, don't try to normalize or extend it. Rather, seek the extraordinary in the ordinary. The way of gnosis is open, not to a particular class, but to all people. Take the first step of finding a community in which you can find gnosis and pursue it. I close with the words of that truly holy gospel, the Gospel of Thomas. Let the one who seeks not stop seeking until one finds. When one finds, one will be troubled. When one is troubled, one will marvel and will reign and will rest.